So welcome today to Meet Our Founders. In this series of episodes, we interview some founders who speak about their experience, the challenges they are facing, and advice they have to give to other founders. Today, I'm glad to be with David Peng, who is CEO of Webmint, based in Berlin. First of all, we would like to know a little bit more about you, David. So can you briefly introduce yourself, and also how did you go from a lawyer to the Web3?
So great to be here. I grew up in New Zealand, so on the other side of the world, and I sort of started my career as a lawyer. So when I was 24, I was working in one of those big law firms with like 500 or 1,000 other lawyers, wearing a suit to work every day, and it was as boring as you can probably imagine it. But I think what was really great about it was that one of my sort of senior lawyers at the time, she was one of the more preeminent blockchain lawyers in Australia. So I was working with her on a lot of these projects. Back then, this was about 2016, it was all about ICOs. This term Web3 wasn't even mentioned. And so amongst some of the bigger companies, we were advising Binance on their token issuance and things like that. And that was really how I was introduced into Web3 or cryptocurrency at the time. And then I understood that there was a use case for it. I got introduced to the dark web, not because of drugs, but because I understood that there was a use case for sort of anonymized and decentralized currency. And so since 2016, I've really been down the rabbit hole. And the reason I moved to Berlin had nothing to do with my career. I was simply very, very bored of being a lawyer. And I was studying German at the time, and I simply got a scholarship at the Goethe Institute and moved to Germany to just study the language. And 4 or 5 years later, here I am.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. So now you have been working in Webmint for almost 2 years, and you founded the project. So what is Webmint?
Yeah, so Webmint is basically a no-code tool to allow for brands and corporations to create dynamic NFTs. And to sort of break that down, an NFT is basically a cryptographic token on the blockchain that's represented by some sort of image. And the dynamic part is the ability to change that NFT over time. One good example I like to give is if you ever use credit cards, you know that with Amex cards, you have like the standard card, the bronze card, the gold card, the double black card, the platinum card. You can do that in a digital version where you're first issued a standard card, and through various activities, that card can get upgraded. So for example, the more you purchase from a brand, or the more you engage with a brand by liking their social posts, sharing their social media, watching their videos, the more you can upgrade. And that's the dynamic part. So it's an ever-changing digital asset.
Thank you. So what problem does Webmint is trying to solve? Can you dig into this and why is it important?
Yeah, I think that initially when we first launched, the problem that we first wanted to solve, and it's been adequately solved now, but at the time it was really just the automation of smart contract creation. So NFTs are regulated by this tool called smart contracts, which basically is a set of code that tells the blockchain or the computer program when to execute a transaction. Back then, you needed developers who understood certain programming languages to actually make this. So we automated that whole process. So you as a user, you didn't need to know any code. You could just upload your media files and our program would actually automate the whole thing. So that was what we had solved initially. But now there's about 50 other companies that solve the exact same thing because people realized creating a smart contract is actually quite easy. But I think what we're solving now is the main issue is that with DTC brands, so direct to consumer brands, it's one of the fastest growing sort of e-commerce industries. It grows 44% year on year. But the problem nowadays is that advertising is really, really ineffective and really expensive. And that's due to the increased privacy laws, especially in the EU, but also increased competition now. So Facebook ads, so Instagram ads are less effective. So a lot of brands are looking for new ways to engage with their customers other than just trying to blast them with advertising or other than just at the point of sale. So what dynamic NFTs does is it allows you to create, firstly, a form of membership between you and the customer. And the dynamic element allows these brands to create experiences that allows the customer to engage with the brand on an ongoing basis without needing the customer to constantly buy more stuff, or without just giving the customer more and more advertisements that may or may not actually reach their intended audience.
Thank you. I think, yeah, it's interesting because everybody know NFT for digital artwork or metaverse, but with your solution, you show that it is possible to do other thing, and that at the core, NFT it's just a technology, and it has other utilities than just this. So my next question, so as you probably know, and I'm sure you know this, for beginners, it's really hard to, it's not easy to get into Web3 because you have to install a MetaMask, you have to know a little bit more about seed phrase, after you have to buy some crypto on Uniswap, so it's not easy. And we are speaking a little bit more and more of Web 2.5, just like a mix of Web 2, where we are living right now, and Web 3. And for example, like Reddit, they sold NFTs, calling them like digital collectibles and not NFT. So we are trying to like simplify this technology. So my question is, what is your position about this, and how do you at Webmint try to address these issues, just the complexity of this technology?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think the first thing to note is there is a huge difference between NFTs as a culture and NFTs as a technology. NFTs as a culture is basically all the stuff we saw in 2022, where people were making millions of dollars, buying pictures of monkeys and just like yelling random things to each other on Twitter, like saying GM or paper hands or things like that. That is really just the culture of NFTs. But NFTs as a technology is basically a token that a user truly is able to own, and is able to, control. So the main difference is if you have a membership card on Web2 software, that is owned by the software. If you upload a picture onto Instagram, that is owned by Instagram. You can't really take that picture to Twitter. I mean, you can screenshot it, of course, but you're not taking the original image. When you own an NFT, you control where that image goes. I could then sell it or transfer it to my parents. I could transfer it to my friends. I can take it across applications. So I think that as a technology, it's something that a user truly owns. That's the main difference. And when you own something, you obviously have a deeper attachment to it and you place greater value onto that thing. And the way we solve for the complexity is, you're right, 99.9% of consumers or of people in general do not understand or do not care about Web3 infrastructure. So what we're trying to do is meet them in the middle and allow them to engage with Web3, with the tools that they're used to. So something that we have, for example, is the ability to purchase via credit card, and the ability to use your Gmail or your email accounts or your social accounts to actually engage. So we've actually launched a lot of experiences for consumers where at the end of the day, what they think they're buying is just a digital pass with their email address. So they don't necessarily know that it's an NFT, and it doesn't really matter. And I think that eventually we'll get to a point where whether you're using Web3 or Web2 technology, from the user perspective, it doesn't matter. All that's happening for the user is they're just purchasing a digital asset that they own. Just like when you go on the internet, you don't care if it's HTTP.S or any of the other protocols. All you're doing is just going onto a website and engaging with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just to erase like all the complexity and to keep the real utility of this technology. My next question is about the challenges that you're facing right now. So we are like in a kind of bear market today, and that's why I'm really interested about what you will say. So what are the biggest challenges that you are facing right now? And maybe it's not around bear market, I don't know. And how do you try to overcome them?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is, I think, still this culture versus technology thing. So I mean, Web3 and NFTs, they inherently can be very useful because, as you know, any transaction on the blockchain is significantly faster and significantly cheaper. And because the blockchain is like a public computer that anyone can build an application on, you're able to move data around much quicker than if you move from one Web2 software to the other. So there's always these advantages of blockchain and Web3 technology, but because of the culture that has dominated Web3, especially this idea that it's a scam or that, you know, people launch NFTs just to make money, I think a lot of brands still view NFTs in this light. And so the problem is one of education to make them understand that there's an underlying technology that will allow you to create these great experiences that will be much quicker and much more efficient, rather than it's this money grab scheme. So I think the education component is probably the biggest barrier at the moment. And I think the other barrier is, you know, a lot of Web2 technology is so entrenched into a customer or a brand tech stack that it's very hard for them to unlearn and relearn sort of new technology. But that's, you know, that's a challenge for any kind of tech, I think.
So my question is, who are the three people that helped you the most where you was building your startup? And it should not be like companies, but just people you met, like mentors, investors, or other entrepreneurs.
The three people I won't name, I won't say like John Smith, like I won't name, but I think that the first one, and this is the biggest mistake we made at the start. I think the first person that is going to be the most helpful is your customer or your target customer. So when we first launched Webmint, we thought we knew what our customers wanted. And so we built something that was not validated. You hear all the stuff about product market fit. And to be honest, it was all bullshit for me at the start until we built a product and we realized that most brands didn't care that much. So it wasn't until we met a founder of a pretty successful D2C brand. You know, when I say successful, I mean more than $5 million of revenue, who would use our product. We were able to sit down with him and have a long conversation about the pain points of customer acquisition, about how, you know, we learned things like how it's actually cheaper for a brand to retain a customer than to get a new customer. We learned things about how the D2C space is not working anymore and that you need to have physical retail spaces to boost your sales. All of these things, or that, you know, most brands use marketing agencies to actually create campaigns. All of these things we had no idea when we built software. So I think the first person that was most useful was this potential user who was willing to sit down with us and actually just talk about his business and his knowledge of the space in general. Because I think knowledge and having an understanding of the space in which you want to operate in is so important. And often a lot of founders, including us, fall into the trap of thinking we know what the problem is by having only very, very limited exposure, or more importantly, just reading some Google articles on Forbes.com or The Economist and thinking that comprehensively covers the issue, when the people who genuinely understand the issues are people who are in that space and actually facing those issues every single day. So the first one is actually the customer, I think. I think the second person that helped me understand how to operate efficiently as a founder is my one of the senior lawyers that I used to work with. So my career journey is, I started as a lawyer and you know, in these big 1,000 lawyer companies, and then I moved into a different startup, so totally different environment. And the biggest thing that I noticed was when you work in these really large and very competitive companies, and it's the same if you work in investment banking, for example, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, or if you work in those big consulting companies like BCG, McKinsey, you know, those ones. There's this culture of fear where you're competing with the people around you to be promoted. And if you don't get promoted, you kind of get kicked out. So it's sort of like a huge sprint at the start where you come in and all these senior lawyers are picking their favorites and picking the people that they want to work with. I will say that this is a highly unhealthy environment where you get stressed, you get burnt out, and it's just not great for your mental health. But what really helped me was it really forced me to look not just at my job description, but at all the ways that I could be productive, like those extra steps that I could take to stand out, to show initiative. So if I didn't know something, instead of just saying, I don't know, let me ask someone else, doing everything that I can to try figure it out. And if I can't figure it out, ask someone and make sure that I remember it for next time. So those first 2 years of me working in this sort of high pressure environment that only comes with these very large and very competitive companies, it really laid the groundwork for me to understand how to be efficient and how to work beyond just my job description and to just take on more roles. And I think that really set me up for success as a founder, because, you know, when you're a founder, you're not just, you don't really have a role, right? You're kind of doing a bit of marketing, a bit of product development, a bit of finance as well, and sort of having that groundwork of understanding how to go that extra mile and how to do all the little things right, and having the discipline to like check my work and not have to rely on other people was a really good practice. So yeah, the second person I think is, you know, my sort of seniors who were, you know, very tough on me, but really pushed me to create this environment where I was really forced to think on my feet and sort of operate under high stress. So it's not healthy, I know, and it probably sounds like really a really difficult time, but I think it really did help me a lot with my career. And I think the third one is really my co-founder. I mean, she is super successful. We have very complementary skills, but having someone who can complement the skills that you lack is extremely important, because at the end of the day, you know, hats off to solo founders, but I could never do that myself. And, you know, where I lack is like the ability to organize, having that finesse when it comes to design and UI and UX. And she just has all of those skills. And that's what allows us to build a great product, and just having the understanding of that you can always disagree, but, you know, come to a peaceful resolution.
Thank you. Do you have other advice for other founders? Like, yeah, what do you learn during your entrepreneur journeys that can help other founders?
Yeah. So the way I became a founder was totally by accident, I would say. Like, I didn't have this idea, like, I'm going to start a business. Let me figure out what problem I can solve and start it. It was more, I was working with my co-founders on something else, and we had a lot of requests to build something for people, and we just realized, hey, this is scalable. We've already built like 60% of it. Let's just keep building, right? But since then, I've sort of spoken with a lot of founders, and what surprised me was a lot of founders want to be founders because they like this idea of just being a founder. There's this, socially, we sort of are trained to praise entrepreneurs, right? We see them as these like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs type of game changers who have left like some sort of lasting impact on society, and a lot of people want to copy that model, and that is totally fine. But I think that the order is wrong. Like, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be a founder, and that's how I'm going to leave some sort of impact on society, when they don't really start with the problem. So my advice is, if you don't just be a founder for the sake of wanting to be a founder because the title sounds cool, or you think it garners some kind of respect. I guarantee you, every time you meet someone who has a startup, the first thing they're going to do is tell you how hard it is to build a startup. And that just says to me, like, you're just trying to brag or get some sort of social respect or social credit because you're a founder, but that doesn't really mean anything. So my advice is really have a problem that you truly are in love with, or you truly want to solve, and then start. Don't just think you're a founder and then go on some journey to find some kind of problem that you don't really relate to. That's probably my biggest advice. And then the second one is understand that it is a lot of work, and it's going to require you to step into roles and into very uncomfortable situations. And that the most important thing is not motivation. It's great to have motivation, but the most important thing is to be able to show up every day and just do your tasks, even when you're not motivated. I think that's probably the biggest one.
Great, thank you. Are there any upcoming milestone or initiatives that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, actually, at the end of this week, we are actually about to release our QR code tool, an app. So basically, we have an app that's going to be in the Apple Store and the apps and the Android Store, where once you do have an NFT, you can actually generate a QR code from that. Which sounds really simple, but actually the QR code unlocks a whole bunch of things. It sort of codes all of the information into a pass that you can save on your phone, and that can actually act as a ticket. That can actually be scanned by other people to trigger different types of updates. So it just really unlocks the ability to take your NFT anywhere. and interact with other technologies like ticket scanning machines that aren't necessarily Web2. So that's probably the next update. And then we also have a lot of conversations upcoming with very large corporations on using NFTs internally. One example is when you work in a big organization, one of the worst things and one of the things that every employee hates is doing online trainings or, doing trainings about, health and safety and things like that. We're talking about using NFTs as rewards for employees who do well in these tests, as employee recognition. And then, the advantage is once you leave that company, you're able to take a lot of these badges with you. So it's almost like a proof of achievement rather than just saying you did something in your CV. So that's something that we are in discussions with. And hopefully in the next few months, that'll be something that we're able to offer as well.
Nice. So proof of attendance with like ticket events and certificate for
Proof of
company.
achievement. Yeah.
Proof of achievement. Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great.
Sure.
So beyond Webmint, what application do you see for NFTs?
Yeah, I actually think the biggest one is digital identity. I think we are probably a few years removed from digital identity because there's still a lot of bureaucracy involved and actually tying your picture and your face and your health records to one token. But I think that the core tenet of an NFT is each one is unique and only owned by, for the most part, only owned by one person. You can also set up tools called, soul-bound tokens, which means an NFT that cannot be transferred to anyone else. And if we can get that infrastructure right, I think it can be used to very quickly verify your identity across different institutions, whether it's a driver's license or getting some sort of government benefit. Having a very streamlined way to do that without having to fill out 40 forms and go through, manual verification each time is really going to save a lot of costs and make a very antiquated system much more efficient. We are, still pretty far from that because we need to set up some sort of infrastructure where the wallet can genuinely be tied to a specific user, and there's still some database where you can perform those checks. But once I think all that's set up, you're able to just tie all sorts of documents, whether that's health documents, government documents, employment documents, to one specific token. And that information cannot be accessed by anyone, but the token itself acts as a verification of that information. I think that's going to address a lot of safety concerns, a lot of privacy concerns, and make a old system much more efficient and much cheaper to run.
And my last question is about Webmint and the industry of NFT or Web3 industry in general. So how do you envision Webmint making a positive impact on the industry? And how do you see NFT industry or Web3 industry evolving?
Yeah, I mean, I think for any, I think for any software, it makes a positive impact if it can be cheaper, faster, and better than the current way of doing things. Currently, to set up a dynamic NFT, you probably need to hire a developer, get some UX designers and things like that. The way Webmint makes an impact right now is that we are simply no code, so we can be used by anyone. We are faster. Instead of having 3 developers take 6 months, it takes 2 hours to build something on our platform, and we're cheaper. I mean, paying for developers, paying for ongoing maintenance is going to cost you probably 30, 40, 50,000 euros. We just have a one-time platform fee of anywhere between 15 to 20,000 euros per year. So I think just in terms of concrete ways that we are making an impact, I think that's the way. But also I think that with a lot of our tools, such as the credit card purchasing, the email onboarding, the no-code layer, we are trying to onboard more people into the space and removing some of those negative connotations with NFTs being a scam or being just a cash grab. In terms of where this industry is going in the future, I don't think anyone can accurately predict. If you remember at the end of 2020, people were saying Bitcoin was going to go to $100,000 and this and that. So I don't have any accurate prediction. I have a hope, which is I hope that, in the future that as the technology becomes more sophisticated, we are going to see much more use of NFTs as digital assets without needing to reference them as NFTs. So people won't really care whether it's an NFT, whether it's just a JPEG or whatever. All people will see are just great experiences, beautiful artwork that they can own. Whether it's an NFT or something else is almost irrelevant. That's really where I hope the industry goes.
So thank you, David, for sharing your experience and for presenting Webmint, which is a solution to create deeper connection between brands and customers, and also helping to create loyalty programs using Web3 technologies. So thank you very much for your time, and it was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks, Audrey.